Welcome to another deep dive. You know how we do it here. And today, we're going to be looking into Wai Lana.
Ah, Wai Lana.
Yeah, you might recognize her from her yoga videos.
Very popular. Very popular.
But we're going way beyond that today. We're going beyond sun salutations
The yoga studio.
to try to understand a much more complicated story.
It's fascinating how someone with such a, peaceful public image can be connected to so much controversy.
Okay, so let's just dive right in. What kind of controversy are we even talking about here?
Well, to get to the bottom of that, we're going to be looking into a collection of articles, social media posts, and legal documents. We're really trying to understand Wai Lana and her connection to Chris Butler.
Ah, Chris Butler. Now, he's the leader of that Hare Krishna offshoot, right? The one that's been accused of being a cult.
That's the one. And while our deep dive is focusing on Wai Lana, understanding Chris Butler's history is really important for context.
I got it. So it's like we're trying to understand a character in a play, but we also need to know the plot.
Exactly. We'll be exploring Wai Lana's role within this organization, touching on themes of business, politics, and spirituality.
Sounds like a recipe for a good time. Let's start with the basics then. Who is Wai Lana? And how did she get involved with Chris Butler?
Okay, so Wai Lana is a yoga teacher. Known for her long-running series of yoga videos and products, she's been a prominent figure in the yoga world for decades, and of course she's also Chris Butler's wife.
And her yoga empire is connected to Butler's organization, the Science of Identity.
Yeah, it is. And in a pretty interesting way, one thing that really stood out to me when going through the material is that Wai Lana's yoga products often feature chanting by Chris Butler, who's credited as Siddha.
Oh, interesting. So right from the start, we see this blending of her personal and professional life with his organization.
Absolutely. And this is where understanding Chris Butler and the science of identity becomes so essential. So he founded and leads this organization, positioning himself as a spiritual leader within a specific lineage of Hinduism called Gaudiya Vaishnavism. However, his teachings and practices have sparked a lot of controversy over the years.
What kind of controversy? Give me the details.
Well, there are former members of Psi who have come forward with accusations that the group is a cult. They allege that Butler exerts undue influence over his followers, isolates them from the outside world, and manipulates them for his own benefit.
Wow, okay, so we're talking about claims of mind control and exploitation.
Yeah, those are some of the serious allegations that have been made.
Hmm.
And it's important to note that Butler has denied these claims. However, they are a recurring theme in the sources that you provided.
And this is all crucial context for understanding Wai Lana.
Yeah.
Because her life and career are so closely tied to Butler and this organization.
Exactly. It's like trying to understand a character without knowing the play they're in.
Okay, I'm starting to see the bigger picture here. We've got Wai Lana, the yoga teacher, married to Chris Butler, the controversial spiritual leader, and her business is intertwined with his organization. What about Wai Lana's early life? Do we know anything about her background and how she met Butler?
Unfortunately, there's not a lot of publicly available information about Wai Lana's early life. However, there are some clues in the source material that might suggest a pattern within the organization.
Pattern? What do you mean?
Well, one of the sources mentions Joseph Bismark, who's a key figure connected to SOI and a business partner of Vijay Eswaran, the head of this controversial multi-level marketing company called Q-Entnet.
Oh yeah, I've heard of QDAN.
Yeah, so anyway, Bismarck describes his own background, saying he was sent to a seminary type of school in the Philippines at a young age.
Okay, but how does that relate to Wai Lana?
Well, we don't have concrete details about Wai Lana's early life, but this account from Bismarck, who is deeply involved with SOI, raises the question of whether there might be a pattern of recruiting young people into the organization. It's something to consider as we delve deeper into Wai Lana's story.
Interesting. So we've got this potential pattern of recruiting young people, a controversial spiritual leader, and allegations of a cult. What role does Wai Lana play in all of this? What's her level of involvement?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And unfortunately, the sources we have don't provide a clear answer. There's a real lack of publicly available information on her personal beliefs and the extent to which she participates in SOI's activities.
So it's a mystery wrapped in an enigma. We know her yoga business promotes SOI through Butler's chanting, but we don't know about her personal level of involvement.
Exactly. And this lack of information makes her story even more fascinating to explore. It's like trying to solve a puzzle with missing pieces.
Speaking of missing pieces, let's talk about Wai Lana's business ventures. We know about her yoga brand, but are there other businesses linked to her and SOI?
There are, and one in particular stands out, Down to Earth, or DTE. It's a chain of health food stores, known for their organic produce and healthy living focus.
Health food stores sounds pretty harmless. What's the connection to SOI?
Well, multiple sources indicate that DTE is closely linked to the organization, with some speculating that it serves as a source of income and a way to promote Salai's ideology.
So when people shop at Down to Earth, they might be indirectly supporting Chris Butler and his organization.
It's a possibility that's raised in the materials you've provided. And to make things even more interesting, there's a possible connection between DTE and QNet, that multi-level marketing company I mentioned earlier.
Okay, remind me about QNet. What's their connection to all of this?
So QNet is a controversial multi-level marketing company that has faced accusations of being a pyramid scheme. And remember Joseph Bismark, the Butler devotee who talked about his time in the Philippines?
Yes, the one who was sent to that seminary-type school.
Right. Well, he's not only a devotee of Chris Butler, but also a business partner of Vijay Eswaran, the founder of QNet. And here's where it gets really interesting. Bismarck owns homes in Hawaii that are reportedly used by Butler and his followers.
So we have Wai Lana's yoga, Chris Butler's organization Down to Earth, and QNet all potentially connected. My mind is officially blown.
Yeah, it's definitely a tangled web, and it highlights the complex interplay between spirituality, business, and potentially questionable practices. And right at the center of it all is Wai Lana.
Okay, so we've established that Wai Lana is at the center of this web of connections. But what about her specifically? We've been talking a lot about allegations and connections. But is there anything in the material that directly addresses Wai Lana's role in so?
It's a great question, and it's one that the sources only partially answer. There's no smoking gun, no document that explicitly outlines her involvement. But there are some intriguing details that offer glimpses into her world.
Okay, I'm all ears. What kind of details?
Well, one document mentions a 1993 birthday celebration for Chris Butler, where Joseph Bismarck is recorded as one of the first disciples to offer him respects. It might seem like a small detail, but...
Bismarck, the devotee of Butler, A&E business partner of QNet's S1.
The very same. This connection, along with the fact that Bismarck owns those homes used by Butler and his disciples, suggests a deep level of involvement with Sonai going back decades. And remember, Bismarck is also connected to QNet.
So potentially there's this long-standing link between Wai Lana's husband, his organization, and a controversial business enterprise. And potentially Wai Lana's connected as well.
Exactly. It's a link that warrants further examination. And it emphasizes how difficult it is to separate the personal from the professional in this story, especially when you consider that Wai Lana's public persona is so intertwined with her yoga brand.
Right. It's not just her yoga poses. It's the whole lifestyle. She represents health, peace, and spirituality. And that brand is promoted through Sarai channels, often featuring Chris Butler's chanting.
Precisely. It all makes it harder to draw a clear line.
Let's shift gears for a moment and talk about something else that's raised in the sources, the criticisms of Chris Butler and his teachings. If Wai Lana is as deeply involved as it seems, these criticisms could reflect on her as well. What are some of the main concerns people have raised?
One of the recurring criticisms is that Butler's version of Gaudiya Vaishnavism deviates significantly from traditional teachings. Some former members even accuse him of twisting these teachings to suit his own agenda.
So it's like he's created his own brand of spirituality, using Hinduism as a starting point, but manipulating it for his own purposes.
That's how many critics see it. One former member even draws a sharp contrast between Butler's teachings and those of Srimati Radharani, a prominent figure in Gaudiya Vaishnavism.
Interesting. Tell me more about that.
This former member says that true followers of Srimati Radharani dedicate themselves to service and humility, focusing on spreading love and devotion to Krishna. But they argue that Butler promotes a self-serving ideology disguised as spiritual enlightenment.
So it's alleged that he's taking this spiritual tradition and twisting it to gain power and control.
That's a harsh accusation, but it's a sentiment echoed by quite a few former members, and it goes beyond just theological differences. There are those who claim that Butler encourages a lifestyle of servitude where his followers are expected to devote their time, energy, and resources to serving him.
That sounds worryingly similar to the cult allegations we discussed earlier.
It does, doesn't it? And this theme of servitude is particularly disturbing when you consider the allegations of financial exploitation that have been made against Butler and Sowai.
You mean like pressuring people to donate large sums of money or work for little or no pay?
Yes. Some former members claim they were pressured to do just that, often in businesses linked to the organization like DTE. These accusations raise serious ethical questions about the nature of Sowai and Butler's leadership.
So we have potentially distorted teachings and forced servitude and financial exploitation. Are there any other criticisms that former members have raised?
Yes. There are concerns about Butler's personal conduct and accusations of hypocrisy. Several former members claim that his actions often contradict his teachings.
It's always unsettling when a spiritual leader doesn't practice what they preach. What kind of hypocritical behavior are we talking about?
Well, one former member describes a situation where Butler, despite owning an expensive air purifier, still required an oxygen bottle, allegedly stating, "What you expect me to breathe? Common air."
Seriously. It's hard to imagine someone who preaches humility and detachment from material things saying that.
Right. It seems to clash with his professed spiritual values. And these alleged contradictions in his behavior fuel a lot of the anger and disillusionment felt by former members.
Understandably so. Discovering that someone you trusted and followed doesn't live up to their own ideals can be deeply upsetting.
Exactly. And it underscores the importance of critical thinking and questioning authority even, or perhaps especially when it comes to matters of spirituality.
It reminds us that no one, regardless of their spiritual status or position, is above scrutiny.
Precisely. And in the case of Chris Butler, these criticisms are numerous and serious enough to warrant a cautious and discerning approach.
Given all these criticisms of Chris Butler and his organization, it's hard not to wonder about Wai Lana's role. Does she support these practices? Does she benefit from them?
Those are excellent questions, and unfortunately, the sources don't give us definitive answers. There are hints, but they're subtle and open to interpretation.
I'm intrigued. Give me those hints.
One detail that stands out is an anecdote from a former SOI member about Butler's alleged attitude towards women. They claim he once said, "I let my disciples dress like karmists and materialists, and now they act like karmists and materialists I hold." In the context of Butler's teachings, karmists refer to people focused on worldly pursuits and who haven't embraced his spiritual path. Materialists are similarly viewed as being preoccupied with possessions and sensory pleasure.
So basically, he's insulting women who don't conform to his strict standards of dress and behavior.
That's one way to interpret it, and it raises questions about Butler's views on women and their roles within SOI.
And how does this tie back to Wai Lana?
Well, it's interesting to consider Wai Lana's image in light of Butler's alleged views. She's often portrayed as graceful, feminine, and devoted to her husband, seemingly a perfect representation of SOI's ideal woman.
It's like she's the poster child for the organization. But it makes you wonder, is that image genuine or carefully constructed?
That's the mystery. And it's part of what makes Wai Lana such a compelling figure. We see this carefully crafted public image, but there are these shadows lurking behind it, hinting at a much more complicated reality.
It's really interesting, right? We have Wai Lana, this picture of peace and serenity, and then you have all these controversies surrounding her husband and the science of identity. It's almost like two separate realities existing side by side.
It really is, and it begs the question, to what extent is Wai Lana complicit in these controversies? Is she an active participant, a silent bystander, or somewhere in between?
And those are tough questions to answer,
Mm-hmm.
especially with the lack of information about her personal views and beliefs. We have this public image, but there are those missing pieces,
Yeah.
the ones that would really help us understand who she is, the person behind the persona.
Yeah, exactly. And I think one of the biggest takeaways from this deep dive is the importance of looking beyond the surface. It's so easy to get caught up in Wai Lana's message of peace and well-being, but we have to remember there's this whole other layer to her story, one that's potentially connected to harmful practices and ideologies.
Yeah, it's almost like those optical illusions where you can see two different images depending on how you look at it.
Mm.
We can choose to see Wai Lana, the peaceful yoga teacher, or we can focus on her connection to this controversial organization and a potentially exploitative business.
And it's up to each individual to decide how they want to reconcile those two images. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer here. It really comes down to your own personal values and beliefs and how much weight you give to the different aspects of her story.
Okay, so how do we even begin to make sense of all of this? We've covered Wai Lana's life, her business ventures, her connection to Chris Butler, and saw the political angle. Even her international recognition is a lot to process.
Yeah, it is. And I think it's important to remember that we're dealing with a lot of allegations and speculation here.
Yeah.
We don't have all the answers. And Wai Lana herself hasn't publicly addressed many of these issues.
Right? It's crucial to be cautious and to not jump to conclusions. But at the same time, we can't just ignore these concerns that have been raised by former SOI members, by people who have investigated the organization. It's important to consider all sides.
I agree. Their voices are so important. They give us these really valuable insights into the potential harms associated with SOI. And those harms should be taken seriously, regardless of Wai Lana's role or level of involvement.
This whole deep dive has been such a good reminder about the importance of critical thinking, especially when it comes to organizations that present themselves as spiritual or religious. It's just so easy to get swept up in the charisma of a leader or the allure of enlightenment. But you have to step back, ask those tough questions, and really scrutinize the evidence.
I couldn't agree more. We have to be really discerning, especially with the information that's out there, and be aware of the potential for manipulation, even in places we might not expect it.
Which brings us back to the question we asked before. Can Wai Lana's yoga teachings and brand truly be separated from the controversy surrounding her husband and the science of identity?
Well, I think that's something each listener has to decide for themselves. It's not a simple answer. It depends on your own values, what you believe, and how you weigh the evidence.
Maybe it's not really about separating the yoga from the controversy. Maybe it's more about recognizing that both can exist at the same time. We can appreciate the benefits of Wai Lana's yoga practice, while also acknowledging the potential harms associated with her husband and his organization.
That's a really good point. It's about holding those two realities together, recognizing the complexity, without dismissing either side.
Yeah, and I think it's about approaching the world with a critical yet compassionate lens, seeking truth, but also understanding that human experience is inherently messy.
Absolutely. And before we finish up, I want to acknowledge the incredible work of the journalists, the researchers, the former SOI members who have brought this information to light. Their dedication to uncovering the truth is what makes deep dives like this even possible.
It really is. Their voices are invaluable, and they remind us how important it is to speak truth to power, even when it's really difficult or even dangerous.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I hope you'll continue to explore, to question, and to really seek a deeper understanding of the world around you.
Keep diving deep.
Yeah.
Keep questioning.
Yeah.
And keep seeking that knowledge. Until next time.